We'll start recording. Okay, the first thing you want to do is define a class and call it engine. So if you have seen a video, do I need to put open and close brackets here when you define a class? Yes or no? No. For the class, you don't need open and close brackets. You need open and close curly brackets. So make a note, for the class, you don't need open and closed brackets. You need curly brackets. Okay, what is the first thing you define inside a class? If you've seen the videos, if you remember. Very good, it's called the constructor. Well done, it's called the constructor. And for the constructor, you need open and close brackets. Okay, just check, let's see. And after that, you need the curly brackets. And inside the constructor, you define the position and the velocity vector. Make a note, inside the constructor, you will define the position and the velocity vectors. So now who remembers how to define the position inside a constructor as a vector? Yeah, very good. You have to use the keyword this, very important, this dot POS. And you say equals create vector. Okay, let's leave this here for now. And similarly, what was the other vector I said you have to define here? This dot position and velocity. So you say VEL. And you say equals create vector, open and close brackets. Question? You can ask question. And inside the velocity vector for now, we'll do 0, 0 because we don't want it to move right now. Okay, now if the question is pass parameters to the constructor, how do you do that? Or pass arguments to the constructor, how do you do that? Inside this, you define the arguments. So you give two arguments, the x and the, so you say x comma y in here. And just like that in here, you say x comma y. And these values will be defined later. We'll see how to give these values. Okay, the second thing you do is you define the movement function. How your shape should move. That'll be called the movement function. Let's call it update here. Now, when you're defining a function inside a class, do you need open and close brackets? Yes or no? For the class, you don't know, but you don't need it. But for the update, do you need it? Yes. So make a note. When you're defining a function inside the class, you need open and close brackets. And after that, you need open and close curly brackets. Okay, now to make a physics engine, we'll define a new variable. Let's call it mouse. And we'll make this into a vector, create vector. And the position of this variable will give mouse x, comma mouse y. Do you remember we learned this, mouse x, mouse y? It tracks the position of your mouse. So this variable will be a vector which tracks the position of your mouse. All right, next thing very important, we'll define the acceleration. Come on quickly, don't, yeah. And if you remember, we used p5 dot vector in the video. So just make a note, the accelerating vector should be defined using p5 dot vector. And in the video, we saw the add function and the multiply function, if you remember. So there's one more function which is called subtraction. So you say SUB. And this is the most important bit. In the brackets, you say mouse, comma, this dot POS. Right, just make a note when you define making a physics engine, the acceleration should be defined like this. And this is the function, or this is the vector, which will, let's make a note, attract the object towards your mouse. So this is the most important bit. This will attract the object towards your mouse. Okay, how do you give magnitude to the acceleration from the video, if you remember? What was the function? It was this dot ACC dot, anyone? SET MAG, set magnitude. And put in a small number here. Let's get this, we'll see what the spellings look like. Okay, so just make a note. This will give acceleration a value. You do that using set magnitude. We'll see when we run it what happens. And the last thing you do is you add something to velocity. What gets added to velocity? Anyone from the video? What always gets added to the velocity? Acceleration. Make a note. Acceleration always gets added to velocity. And velocity gets added to position. Make a note. Acceleration will always get added to velocity, and velocity will always get added to position. And this is how you add it. You say this dot ACC. And similarly, you say this dot question. Velocity is always added to the position, and acceleration is always added to the velocity. Similarly, you say this dot POS dot add this dot PL. So these two things always the same. Make a note. Acceleration gets added to velocity, velocity gets added to position. Okay, so we got the movement function. What other function do we need? The shape function. So the next one is, what shape do you want to use? So let's call it the shape function. In this case, we'll call it display. Okay, does it need open and close brackets? Yes, because it's a function, not a class. And after that, you need open and close curly brackets. Right, you always start with your shape with what function? Before you decide what shape it is, you give it a color. How do you give it a color? Stroke is the boundary. To give the color, you say? Anyone remembers? Fill, very good. So you start with fill. You can give in some values. Let's do an ellipse, just like we've been doing it. Right, how many things inside an ellipse? 4 things inside an ellipse. Write down. The first one is the x position. So you say these dot pos dot x. The second is the y position. This dot pos dot y. This will give the position of your shape. And the other 2 things will give you the height and the width of the ellipse. So let's do, say, 50 and 60, something like that. So make a note, this right here will be your class that you need for the physics engine. You will need the constructor, you will need the update function, and you'll need the display function. Right. Once you do this, what else do you need to do? Is this enough? Yes or no? No, you have to define the instance of the class. So on the top, you say let W, or let's call it E or whatever. Let's call it W because that's what we've been doing. Let's make the canvas a bit bigger. Now, what do I do in setup here? What else do I need to do? We have to use what keyword here? The new keyword. Make a note. Once you define this, in here you have to use the new keyword. So you say W equals new. Very good. Engine. And in this bracket, we give the value of X and Y. So let's give 2 values, say 200, 200, something like that. Just make a note, this is a very important function to create the instance. Right, what else do I need to do? Yeah. Say it again. Yeah, we can do that later on, but before that, what is the other main thing? In the function draw, yeah, so in the draw function, we need to call these functions. So you say w.update, because we call it update now, and w.display. And that's it. This is how you have created your first physics engine. This will make the object that you have attract towards your mouse. Let's see if it works. Fingers crossed. Any questions here? Do you want to look at any part? Have you written all of this? Just tell me which part. Write down this whole code. Okay, let's try and run this and see what happens. So look at that. You have the shape moving, but if I move the mouse here, look at that, automatically the shape turns towards the, if I move the mouse here, the shape is turning and coming towards the, pretty cool. So now let's try and give a smaller value here. So now it's a bit slow. Look at that. It's attracted towards the, if I move this, is that making sense? We'll see when we get there. Yeah, we'll see. All right, so here's a question. I want the shape to change colors as it moves. How do we do that? I want the shape to change colors as it moves. What do I need to change? Any ideas? Is the question clear? So we'll have to change fill. What do I write here? This dot. Similarly, if I do right, if I run this and see, now see what happens. So look at that. As it moves, the color is changing. Where is it? Come on. Look at that. Pretty cool. Okay, there's one more function to make the speed a bit normal. So just make a note, there's one more function, maybe we didn't learn that. Instead of set magnitude, because it's going out of the screen, there's one more function which is called normalize. Not sure if it's Z or S, but let's try Z because American. And then you'll have to say this.acc.mult, the multiply function and a small value. So instead of set magnitude, you can do these two, and this will slow down your object, will normalize the speed. Run it. So now look at that. It is not going that far, if you see now. Sorry? So look at that. It's not going wild and going away. Right, pretty cool. You created a force. All right, let's do one more thing. Make one more object. So now you have one object. Create one more object that can move according to the mouse, both together on the screen. How do we do that? So you have an ellipse, make a circle or something. So what do? Define another function, call it shape2. Call it display2. And use the same thing. Okay, but maybe give different position. Divide by 2. Divide by 2. Maybe a different size, 120. So the more shapes you need, the more functions you can make in your class. All right, what else do I need to do? I made the function. Now I need to go up here and call the function. So you'll have to say w dot display2 open and closed. Is that making sense? If I run this, now look at that. It's like the earth and the moon, kind of. They're both. So this is like an example of gravitation that you've made from the sun. Our next question is, I want the background to change color as I move the mouse. How do I do that? As I move the mouse, the color of the background needs to change. In the background here, you put, say, mouse X, and then something else, yeah, say 10. Let's run it and check. So look at that. As I move the mouse, the color of the background is changing. Is that making sense? One last thing. What if I want to trace their path? As it moves, I want the path to be traced. Well done. You move the background to setup. In that case, the color may not change. Let's see. So if I do this and run this, see a little bit of trace. But let's change this to, how do you make it white? What was the number? 255, right? So look at that. It's making the trace. Okay, so in the exam, you may have to make 3 or 4 such objects. Same thing, but 3 or 4 different objects and make a trace or similar. Is that okay? Okay, so with this, we finish everything.